My boyfriend, 27M, and I, 24F, have been together for 3 years. Although we don't live together, we are close enough to spend a lot of time together. However, it is very rare for us to spend a whole day together. When we have, it's usually been on a weekday where our schedules happen to align, like when there's no work in class that day, and we have never, and I mean never, spent a day together on the weekends. He works as a research assistant while pursuing his PhD. Every single weekend for the 3 years we've been together, he insists he has work. Reflecting on it now, I realize how naive I've been, foolishly trusting him and believing that he had work every single weekend for 3 years. That was until today. I've been studying for finals, and it's the toughest it's ever been, so I was craving some time with him. Just a day where we could kick back and relax with each other. Of course, he says he can't because he's working, and I shut up about it. So, today, I'm getting antsy anyway and hoping we could at least spend the evening together. I end up texting him, asking when he thinks he'll be back, and we can spend the night. I've done this plenty of times before, and he always responds fairly quickly. This time I was left waiting for a while. After 2 hours, I decided to text a work friend of his who's also a research assistant with him, and wouldn't you know it turns out they don't have work today. In fact, he informs me in that same text that they rarely ever have work on weekends, rarely ever. So now, I'm sitting here wondering what the heck is going on. I have no idea how to confront him about this. I mean, this has been going on for 3 whole years. If he's cheating on me, he basically has a second family at this point, and obviously, that's where my mind goes, and I have no clue what else it could possibly be. Like, is there any possible explanation for this besides cheating? How in the world do I confront him about something he's been doing for 3 years? Since he's doing whatever it is tomorrow, do I just drive over to his place in the morning and wait and then follow him? Update 1. When I logged off, opinions seemed pretty split on what I should do. Most people just decided to call him a cheater or say that I'm the side chick. Frankly, I wasn't sure I could wait another day to confront him, so I confronted him the night of that post. I texted him, telling him to come over when his work was done, and he did. I waited about 5 minutes for him to settle in before telling him that we needed to talk about something important. He immediately responded with, "Uh-oh," which was a bit demeaning, but that sarcastic response honestly matches his personality. I told him everything that happened, how hurt I was, how I didn't feel like I could trust him about anything considering he's been doing this for 3 years, and then asked if he had anything to say. He told me he wasn't cheating on me or anything like that, he was just embarrassed about what he'd been doing. So I asked him what he could possibly be so embarrassed about as to hide it and lie to me about it for 3 years. He takes like a minute to compose himself and then mutters something incomprehensible. He clearly feels guilty, but I obviously don't hear it, so I ask him what he said because I didn't hear. Then, more clearly this time, he tells me that he volunteers at a homeless shelter every weekend since coming here for his PhD. Volunteering at a homeless shelter? I swear to you, whatever emotions are coming across here were multiplied 10 times in the moment. I could not comprehend what he was saying. Like, he was embarrassed for volunteering at a homeless shelter? It didn't, and still doesn't, make any sense. So I asked him what he meant, and he repeated that he volunteers at a homeless shelter for 6 hours on Saturday and 6 hours on Sunday, every weekend. Of course, I asked him why he would be embarrassed about that, and he asked if we can talk about this more tomorrow, which was Sunday, and he can instead show me that he isn't lying by taking me to volunteer. I don't know what I was really thinking, I think my mind was just blank, so I agreed and asked him to leave. He apologized for the whole thing and left and then sent a text that he'd pick me up in the morning so he can prove to me that he's not lying. So the next morning came, and he wasn't lying. He takes me to a homeless shelter, and we make food, clean, and pack daily necessities for 6 hours. It clearly isn't the place to have the conversation, so I spend most of my time doing the work and chatting with other people, and they were really nice. But of course, the whole thing was still weighing on my mind the entire time, so I started asking them about my boyfriend, and they confirmed that he's been working there as long as they remember, and that he's even been there longer than most of them. Finally, our volunteering ends, and we head back to his car. I try to start the conversation, but he shuts me down and asks me to wait until we get back to his place. I say fine, and leave it at that. Maybe I'm being a doormat here or whatever, but I was just so confused and lost. Once there, the talking begins. He asks if I believe that he's telling the truth about working at the homeless shelter every weekend, and I say that I do since I confirmed it with a lot of people while there, but I also said that I don't understand the lying, especially for as long as he did. He apologizes again and asks if I really want to know why he kept it a secret. Obviously, I say of course, and he sighs and then tells me that he doesn't like people knowing that he likes helping people. I feel like I'm in a fever dream because this is so weird, and I ask him to explain. He tells me that when he was an undergraduate student, he would always try to help his classmates behind the scenes by discussing problems they had, or negotiating for curves, or extensions on their assignments, even when he didn't personally need it. He said he enjoyed doing it and kept doing it as a master's student, but then started to do so before and after classes publicly. Apparently, most of his classmates were still happy with him, but a few basically hated him for it because he was babying them or something, so he went back to doing things behind the scenes and no longer tries to associate himself with any of the things he does to help others. Hopefully, I'm not the only one who finds this so incredibly weird. Like, the homeless shelter stuff and assisting your classmates aren't even remotely the same. I say as much, and he tells me it does the same thing. It helps people, so he doesn't like people to know about it because then they might misinterpret his intent and think he's masquerading as a good person. Then he assures me that he's not a good person at all, but he still wants to do what he can, so this is what he does when he has time. What the flippity flop am I listening to? So I ask if he really thinks I would get mad that he's helping homeless people in his free time, and he tells me he wasn't sure at first, especially since I wanted to spend weekends together when we were first going out together. No duh, every couple does, so he just lied to hide it at first, but he knows I wouldn't do that now, but kept the lie going because he thought it would be too weird to suddenly say that he's volunteering at a homeless shelter. I feel like I've come to the conclusion that he's just really, really weird. His way of thinking has always been odd, but this, in particular, is just so weird. Like, he seems to understand the situation and where I'm coming from, but didn't think to tell me the truth on his own? We started going in circles, so I ended the conversation and had him drive me home in silence. Since then, he sent a number of texts and has tried to call me a few times. I didn't pick up on Monday or Tuesday because I felt like I needed time to think, but I finally picked up today, and we had a talk in which we both reiterated what we had said. I know a lot of people were telling me to break up with him, but I'm still thinking things through. I'm going to try to get him to hang out this weekend and make my decision after that. This whole thing has been so weird. I'm sorry that I've repeated that so much, but my brain is still rather scrambled. Update 2. So I asked him to come over so we could talk, and he did. I then asked him some of the questions people had on here that I had written down. Volunteering for 6 hours but still not having time for me. He said he would get there a little early and leave late, but would then spend the remaining hours running errands and actually working on PhD/assistant stuff. I asked if he could give me details. He gave some details about academic articles that I don't remember. I asked why he couldn't spend more weekend evenings with me if this was the case, and he said that he was really busy with work and that I would distract him if I was around. Ouch. Out of all the things said, I think this is the one that bothers me the most. I asked if the volunteering was court-ordered. He laughed at that and was clearly confused by the question, but answered that given the special population he works with during his PhD, he doubts he'd be able to work with them if he had a record that required so many hours. I asked if he was ever going to tell me about the volunteering. Initially, he says he doesn't know, then replies that he probably wouldn't have. He apologized for lying, but then said that whether he was working or volunteering doesn't make a difference to how much time he spent with me. Obviously, I pushed back on this, and he got defensive. Ultimately, I asked him to explain to me again why he hid it in the first place, and he went into more specifics. One of his professors was a jerk, and some of his classmates were scared to talk to him about their grades, so he thought he could show them that he was willing to discuss grades, and he made a joke about his own grade in class. The professor didn't find it funny, went on a tirade about respect and showing him up, and apparently, the class ended shortly thereafter because it was so tense. He said that some of the other students felt like they needed to cut ties with him to show the professor they weren't in on the joke, and that a few of them made a show of hating him from that point forward. Hearing it more in-depth at least makes this make a little more sense to me. I stated again that helping the homeless and helping classmates seemed like entirely different things altogether. He said that they both felt the same to him, but that I was probably right and he was wrong. I asked him why he said he's a bad person. He replied asking if he said that, and I said yes. He said that he didn't want the volunteering to make him seem like a good person because he's not. Again, I asked what he meant, and he replied that I know what he means, and I said I'm not sure I do. Personally, I think he has low self-esteem, but this is a weird way to express it, and I'm not sure what else it could be. I told him I wasn't sure I wanted to continue the relationship because of the lying. He seemed hurt, but then just said okay and that it's my decision. I told him that he should at least get therapy for the classmate thing because it's clearly affected him negatively, and all he said was that he probably should, but he won't. After that, I gave him an ultimatum: either spend more time with me on weekends and go to therapy, or we break up. I told him to think about it and that he has until Saturday. He said he would, and he went on his way. Update 3. Saturday came, and he asked me to compromise. He would take a day off from volunteering if I volunteered with him on the other day, and he wouldn't have to go to therapy. I told him later that night that I'd accept the compromise if he was willing to go to just one, therapy session. On Sunday morning, he told me he wouldn't be willing to go to therapy and asked that we go out to dinner. We went to a local diner and basically talked about ending things. He apologized for ending things this way and said that he knew he wasn't exactly being reasonable, but he's doing what he feels like he needs to do. I basically said that that's up to him. We wished each other the best, he gave me a parting hug, and I went on my way. So yeah, 3 years of commitment for this.